Marcus Johnson pedaled down Maple Street with the kind of quiet determination only a teenager who had learned early how to move through the world unseen could carry. The autumn sun spilled across the pavement, catching the gloss of his black sneakers and glinting off the rims of his worn bike. He inhaled the crisp air, savoring the faint smell of cinnamon from the corner bakery, the distant hiss of steam from the diner's grill. At 15, he carried himself with a careful dignity, a composure rare for someone his age, molded by the constant awareness that the world often measured him by skin, not by mind. At home, the Johnson household was a sanctuary of rhythm and warmth. Denise, his mother, hummed a soft gospel tune while stirring oatmeal in the kitchen. Her hands, calloused from decades of nursing, moved with graceful precision. Amira, his younger sister, sprawled on the living room floor with her sketchbook, capturing the morning sunlight on paper. The small apartment smelled of fresh bread, old books, and faint vanilla from the candles Marcus's mother liked to light on Sunday mornings. There was laughter, quiet, restrained but unguarded. It was a fragile peace, one Marcus cherished deeply. At home, the Johnson household was a sanctuary of rhythm and warmth. Denise, his mother, hummed a soft gospel tune while stirring oatmeal in the kitchen. Her hands, calloused from decades of nursing, moved with graceful precision. Amira, his younger sister, sprawled on the living room floor with her sketchbook, capturing the morning sunlight on paper. The small apartment smelled of fresh bread, old books, and faint vanilla from the candles Marcus's mother liked to light on Sunday mornings. There was laughter, quiet, restrained but unguarded. It was a fragile peace, one Marcus cherished deeply. He knelt beside Amira, brushing a strand of her hair from her forehead, and offered a teasing grin. "You're shading the tree like it's auditioning for a Pulitzer." She shot him a mock glare, but her smile betrayed delight. These were the moments Marcus lived for, small, unassuming, a reminder that his life could be full of beauty even before the storms came. School, however, demanded a different version of him. There, Marcus moved through crowded hallways like a shadow, invisible unless noticed, and always careful to bend toward neutrality. He was brilliant, articulate, and acutely aware of the subtle judgments etched into the walls of Lincoln High. Even his closest friends, mostly in the debate club, noticed how he measured his words, how he never let anger dictate action. His journals were filled with observations about inequality, strategy, and human behavior, a private archive of a mind far beyond his years. Yet beneath the restraint was a pulse of quiet rebellion, a yearning to demand the respect and dignity the world so often withheld from him. Lincoln High smelled of industrial cleaners and worn linoleum. Sunlight struggled through dusty blinds, casting stripes across desks and floors, like bars of an invisible prison. Marcus stepped into his first period history class, backpack slung low, sneakers squeaking softly. The room carried a tension that only the familiar, daily pattern of microaggressions could create, a quiet, constant oppression that settled into the bones. Ethan Carter leaned against a desk near the back, arms crossed, smirk tugging at his lips. He whispered something to a group of boys and laughed, loud and careless. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct to shrink away, but he straightened his posture, choosing calm. Mr. Harlow, the history teacher, was grading papers at his desk, his eyes flicking occasionally toward Marcus. There was a casual, almost imperceptible bias in the way he glanced over Marcus's work, a lingering judgment that never touched the white students in the class. It was subtle, yet unmistakable. When a question was posed to the room, Marcus raised his hand, a precise, polite gesture, but Mr. Harlow called on Ethan first, then another white student, skipping Marcus entirely. The unspoken message was clear. Marcus's intelligence could be ignored, dismissed, or mocked without consequence. Even as Marcus carefully navigated the social terrain, he couldn't escape the sting of the whispered remarks, the sideways glances, the casual jokes that drew lines between him and the rest of the school. He had grown accustomed to the silent hostility, the way the world seemed to press down on him while pretending to remain neutral. And yet, he carried himself with dignity, drawing strength from the small joys of home, from his mother's unwavering belief in him, and from the knowledge that restraint was a form of power he was only beginning to understand. It happened during a class presentation. Marcus stood at the front of the room, his project a carefully constructed timeline of systemic racial injustice in the town, a compilation of newspaper clippings, census data, and personal interviews he had painstakingly gathered. He spoke with precision, letting facts and logic carry his words. The sunlight fell across his face, illuminating the calm authority in his expression. Then Ethan Carter laughed. Loud, sharp, unrelenting. He mimicked Marcus's gestures, twisting his words into ridicule. Other students followed, some filming the scene on their phones. Laughter ricocheted through the classroom, a cruel chorus. Marcus felt the heat rise to his cheeks, but did not raise his voice. He exhaled slowly, focusing on the evidence laid out on the projector screen. That evening, Marcus sat at his desk in the small corner of his room, papers spread around him like a battlefield. His fingers traced lines of evidence, notes on civil rights law, and strategic plans for addressing the bias he faced. In these moments, he revealed a side few ever saw. Marcus was not just a student. He was a strategist in miniature, a mind trained by nights spent reading, by debates won in the shadows, and by lessons whispered from his mother, a former activist. As he typed, he unearthed documents from the local library archives, connecting patterns of discrimination spanning decades. The truth emerged clearly. Systemic bias had been woven into the town's institutions, and Marcus, armed with intelligence and strategy, had the tools to confront it. He began drafting letters, planning presentations, and reaching out to allies who could amplify his voice. The power dynamic shifted, not through violence or rage, but through precision, foresight, and the unassailable strength of truth. Marcus's project was submitted to a youth journalism outlet, and within days, the story went viral. Images of him presenting, juxtaposed with historical injustices, circulated online. Former students, teachers, and local activists stepped forward, lending their voices to the growing chorus demanding accountability. News crews arrived at Lincoln High, capturing interviews with parents and students. Marcus, once isolated, now found himself at the center of a movement he had never anticipated, yet had prepared for in his quiet, methodical way. Threats and backlash accompanied the support. Mr. Harlow dismissed him publicly, parents questioned his motives, and Ethan Carter's family demanded retribution. But allies multiplied. Lawyers, reporters, and civil rights activists who recognized the integrity and brilliance in Marcus's approach. The town's simmering tension reached a boiling point, and the stakes could not have been higher. With the guidance of a civil rights attorney, Marcus and Denise compiled evidence. Emails, social media clips, eyewitness accounts, and archived documents. Letters were drafted, complaints filed. Public forums were scheduled. Marcus presented with a calm, unwavering precision, exposing institutional bias with facts that could not be ignored. Every move was calculated, a chess game played across public and legal arenas, designed to hold power accountable without resorting to aggression. At the town hall, the room brimmed with tension. Parents, teachers, and students waited as Marcus stepped forward. His voice, steady and deliberate, cut through the murmurs. He presented timelines, comparisons, and personal testimonies, dismantling decades of systemic negligence. Then, a senior teacher, long silent, stood beside him, affirming the truth in words that stunned the room into silence. The weight of reality crashed over the board members, forcing them to confront what had been ignored. Marcus's intelligence, patience, and restraint had turned the tables, leaving injustice exposed and undeniable. Weeks later, the hallways of Lincoln High were different. Policies had shifted, training implemented, and Marcus moved through the corridors with a newfound respect from peers and faculty alike. He returned to his room at home, watching a mirror sketch in the late afternoon light, feeling the quiet satisfaction of change, both personal and institutional. He had faced systemic injustice and survived with intellect and dignity. And as he looked forward, he understood that the true legacy of courage was not in fighting with fists, but with unwavering truth, strategy, and the moral courage to hold the world accountable.